Coming up on Jerusalem Dateline, Houthis continue firing missiles at Israel with the U.S. striking back. Unprecedented protests in Gaza call for Hamas's ouster. Can they be believed? Plus, a positive ending to one man's kidnapping nightmare. We'll hear from the father of Sagui Dekel Chen. And spelling it out, nominee for ambassador to Israel Mike Huckabee articulates his thoughts on terrorism and the friendship between Israel and the U.S. All this and more coming up on this edition of Jerusalem Dateline.
Hello and welcome to this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. I'm Chris Mitchell. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is calling anti-Semitism a disease that's throughout the world, including on U.S. campuses, and something Congress is trying to fight. The U.S. is also physically fighting the Iranian-backed Houthis in Yemen as they continue to launch missiles at Israel. Here's the latest.
Israelis ran for cover once again as the Houthis in Yemen launched 2 more missiles at Israel in the middle of the day on Thursday. Interceptors shot both of them down. The U.S. has been hitting the Houthis with air and missile strikes for 2 weeks now in an attempt to halt their attacks on Israel and global shipping passing through the Red Sea. President Trump says the Houthi attacks have killed many and disrupted international shipping, but the U.S. offensive is making an impact.
The attacks have been very successful, even beyond our wildest expectations. We've hit them very hard, very successfully, and we're going to do it for a long time.
The administration reportedly has sent another ceasefire proposal to Hamas, seeking the release of American hostage Edan Alexander and a breakthrough in ceasefire negotiations. But so far, no reply from the terror group. Meanwhile, the IDF is striking targets in southern Lebanon after 2 rockets were launched at Israel this morning. In Jerusalem, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu thanked those who came to an international anti-Semitism conference to stand against what he called barbarism.
I say barbarism because anti-Semitism is a disease carried by barbarians that threaten all civilized societies. These anti-Semites wish to destroy not only the Jewish state, they seek to destroy the forces of modernity in the Arab and Muslim world. They seek to drag it back to a primitive and violent medievalism.
Netanyahu warned the fires of anti-Semitism are spreading across the Western world.
They rage in Europe's capitals, in the Western press, in social media. They rage in America's elite universities.
A Turkish student at Massachusetts elite Tufts University has been arrested by ICE agents for alleged pro-Hamas activities. Secretary of State Marco Rubio explained why Rumeysa Öztürk's visa has been yanked, and others would be as well.
We gave you a visa to come and study and get a degree, not to become a social activist that tears up our university campuses. And if we've given you a visa and then you decide to do that, we're going to take it away. I encourage every country to do that.
With the 500% spike in anti-Semitic incidents on American campuses, Congress is stepping in to help fight it.
Universities have been put on notice. Failing to protect a student's civil rights will no longer be tolerated. If universities refuse to follow the law, to address discrimination on campuses, and to support Jewish students, then they should not expect the support of the federal taxpayer.
Senator Cassidy also announced a probe into the activities of the group American Muslims for Palestine on college campuses, claiming its leaders have ties to Hamas.
This week has seen unprecedented protests in Gaza against Hamas. The gatherings are extraordinary because of the 18-year silencing of all free speech in the Gaza Strip. Ever since Hamas took control in 2007, any discontent or opposition has been squelched by threat of bodily harm or even death until now. Paul Strand brings us the story.
In an unprecedented show of discontent, hundreds in the Hamas-controlled Gaza Strip protested Hamas rule this week, carrying white flags and calling for the handover of the October 7th hostages. As one cameraman filming the event said, "We're sending a message to the entire world. We reject the rule of Hamas." For these Gazans, Hamas rule has meant unending war.
Hamas can't help but use it as a weapon to harm civilians. It's a criminal move that divided the Palestinian people and brought us wars and woes for more than 18 years.
The Arab countries won't provide a solution for us. If they were going to help us, they would have helped us from the beginning. Arab countries since 2014 have been trying to build Gaza, but that external aid hasn't done anything except build those Qatari towers.
Unending war should come as no surprise. The late Hamas leader, Ismail Haniyeh, articulated the terror organization's goals, which are also spelled out in the Hamas charter.
We say today explicitly that the armed resistance and the armed struggle are the path and the strategic choice for the liberation of the Palestinian land from the river to the sea.
Armed resistance has meant using the Gazans as human shields. The late Hamas leader, Yahya Sinwar, wrote that the Palestinian death toll would infuse life into the veins of this nation, prompting it to rise to its glory and honor. In another message to Hamas leaders in Qatar, Sinwar maintained that thousands of civilian casualties are necessary sacrifices. Hamas's strategy also meant building terrorist infrastructures in densely populated areas, such as schools, hospitals, and mosques, while the terrorists hid in tunnels.
Many people are asking, since you've built 500 kilometers of tunnels, why haven't you built bomb shelters where civilians can hide during the bombardments?
These tunnels are meant to protect us from the airplanes. We are fighting from inside the tunnels. Everybody knows that 75% of the people in the Gaza Strip are refugees, and it is the responsibility of the United Nations to protect them.
With much of Gaza in rubble, the challenge looming is how Gazans will rebuild their lives. President Trump floated a plan to relocate the Arab residents to Jordan, Egypt, or other nations. Supporters of the plan called it thinking out of the box. Opponents of Trump's plan call it ethnic cleansing. Egypt has come up with an alternate plan that leaves the civilians in Gaza, which the Arab League has approved. But what are the Gazans saying?
So for God's sake, we demand the borders be opened, because we've had enough. We don't have a livelihood, no work, no life. I finished high school and I'm educated. It's the best solution.
Sooner or later, the borders will open, God willing, with no place closed off, and we'll have the opportunity to go abroad, because people want to leave the Strip and get on with their lives in another geographical area where they can work.
Look at this view. What we live all day. We break and work. What do we need? I want to travel. Gaza. I don't want it.
We, the Palestinian people in Gaza, are all awaiting resettlement, but we don't know how, when, or where to. Hamas is willing to sacrifice half or three-quarters of the Gaza Strip's population in order to stay in power. They've been saying for decades, we will only hand over Gaza as rubble, or on Judgment Day.
We don't want to live in Gaza. Nothing remains in Gaza, just a big shame. Now we travel in donkeys and horses. There's no gasoline, no water, no electricity, no money, no work, no fruit. There's nothing. Open the border for us. Let us out.
President Trump has said that relocating civilians would break the cycle of rebuilding and facilitating another war with Hamas. Paul Strand, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Coming up, a look at Israel's strategic and strong ally in the Caucasus region.
We often hear more about Shia Muslims because they're the majority in Iran. And in Iran, the focus is on destroying Israel. One Shia Muslim country, however, wants to stand with Israel and other countries seen as enemies of Iran. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl brings us that story.
Azerbaijan sits at the crossroads of Europe and Asia, strategically positioned next to Iran, Turkey, and Russia. It aligned with Israel after gaining independence from the Soviet Union in 1992.
And since that time, Azerbaijan is an independent state, which immediately established diplomatic relations with the State of Israel.
The Jewish community has felt at home there for generations, and 6 years ago, CBN News visited the country for a closer look.
This is Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan. Located on the Caspian Sea, the country is one of the world's major producers of oil and gas, and this city is the center of the country's economy.
Israel's Foreign Minister Gideon Saar wrote on X that Azerbaijan's Economy Minister Mikhail Jabarov was visiting Israel. Azerbaijan is a friendly country to Israel. Our relations are strategic for both sides and are constantly progressing. We discuss strengthening the economic and energy ties between our countries. We will continue developing this important relationship. The two countries signed a deal for natural gas exploration off Israel's Mediterranean coast. In 2023, Israel was Azerbaijan's sixth largest oil buyer.
On one hand, Azerbaijan supplies about 60% of oil resources which Israel needs, despite of the fact that this pipeline is going from Georgia and then through Turkey. On one hand, Azerbaijan has a very good relations with Israel, strategic partnership, as I say.
Professor Zev Khanin of Bar-Ilan University says a priority of Azerbaijani President Ilham Aliyev is to smooth out troubled relations between Israel and Turkey. When Turkish President Recep Erdogan condemned Israel, Azerbaijan sent an envoy to cool him down.
He came to explain to Mr. Erdogan that if he is interested that Turkey will be a hub for sending natural resources, energy, oil and gas to Europe, they have to relax and claim down a little bit from this letter, from the stuck case of anti-Israeli rhetorics.
Khanin adds that Azerbaijan wants to become a major player in the region.
Azerbaijan is interested and playing a quite significant role in that cluster from Eastern Mediterranean to the Caucasus and a little bit also to Central Asia.
According to Khanin, the country keeps its relationship with Israel under the radar. Even so, Azerbaijan buys Israeli military equipment and shares intelligence on Iran.
For Azerbaijan, Israel is a key element for establishment of anti-Iranian bloc in order to preserve its own security.
Khanin says the U.S. should be more interested in those ties too.
On one hand, I think in Washington they understand the role of Azerbaijan, what the country is. On the other hand, many subjects believe that Washington doesn't appreciate cooperation between Israel and Azerbaijan enough.
With the Oslo peace accords no longer effective, Khanin says President Trump is looking to grow a new Middle East alliance.
Adding of new countries to Abrahamic records, it's also adding new forces, new subjects to what they call Middle Eastern NATO.
And that would likely include more countries.
Azerbaijan is the first in line.
Khanin says that its relations with Israel should be enough to encourage the U.S. that Azerbaijan is a reliable partner. Julie Stahl, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Still ahead, home in their arms at last. A good ending to one family's nightmare.
After the release of 33 hostages held in Gaza, we're hearing stories of their time in captivity, filled with horror as well as hope and relief. While they face a time of recovery and readjustment, the families are more than thankful to have them back. CBN Middle East correspondent Julie Stahl spoke with the Israeli-American father of one of those recently released.
After 498 days in Gaza, freed hostage Sagui Dekel Chen gained his release from Hamas captors. His father, Jonathan Dekel Chen, tells CBN News it was like a rebirth.
There's the before and after. It was a living hell every day from October 7, 2023 until February 14th when he was finally released. And since then, it's like having a newborn 36-year-old son who had his, launch on that day and now is a little under 4 weeks old. It's a crazy concept, but that's how I'm experiencing it.
And I bet you still want to hold him in your arms, right?
I barely let him out of my sight.
Yes.
But I compete with his wife and 3 little girls.
That's because following Sagui's release, the new father got to meet his now 15-month-old daughter, Shachar, for the first time. When Hamas terrorists abducted Sagui while defending his community of Nir Oz, his pregnant wife, Avital, and 2 daughters, Bari and Gali, remained safely hidden in their home.
Sagui was taken hostage. He, at the time, was wounded. He arrived in Khan Yunis, in the Gaza town right across the border, at around noontime. From there, he was taken to a hospital in Khan Yunis where his wounds were initially treated.
Just days after the kidnapping, CBN News spoke with Dekel Chen, who didn't know the fate of his son. Only after 2 months, following the first hostage release, did he hear reports that his son Sagui remained alive. They would not receive official confirmation until February 2025.
We didn't have a positive proof of life until he walked out on his own 2 feet of that Hamas minivan at the meeting point where the Red Cross picked them up in Khan Yunis.
Dekel Chen says his son spent most of those 16 months underground in Hamas tunnels.
For the duration of those 498 days, he saw no sunlight. That alone to the human body takes a toll. There was very little, if any, medical care given. And we know that there are even people from our kibbutz who died as a result of lack of proper medical care, constant malnutrition, if not starvation.
Even in the dark, Sagui remained aware of his time in captivity.
Sagui figured out that the 498 days that he was in captivity equates to 43 million seconds, and he felt every one of them.
Founded in 1955, Nero's had around 400 members, making it like a big family. Some 47 died during the invasion.
79 were taken hostage from Kibbutz Nero's out of the initial 240 hostages who were taken by Hamas and other terrorist groups. Kibbutz Nero's was ground zero for the massacre on October 7th and the hostage taking.
About 80% of the remaining Nir Oz residents now live in the southern city of Kiryat Gat. The highest priority is to see the return of the hostages and then deal with the future of their kibbutz.
Our home's completely destroyed. Kibbutz Nir Oz is uninhabitable. But we can't even begin the mourning process and the recovery process until those 14 people are back home amongst the 59. I think at that point we'll begin to formulate what next steps are. For Sagui, there's a recovery and rehabilitation process that he's going to have to go through that's going to take some time.
About half of the surviving community are expected to return and rebuild, while others, including the Dekel Chen family, will not.
30+% want to go as a community, this is mostly the young families, want to go together to live in a different kibbutz that's not across the border from Gaza.
Dekel Chen still sees a positive side.
The experiences of the last 16 months have given me a kind of renewed faith in the people of Israel and their supporters around the globe of many different religions. As I mentioned before, we've been embraced by the vast majority of Israelis in the diaspora and by certainly Christian communities everywhere I've gone.
Beyond that, he reflects on miracles that happened in the middle of the horrors.
We can't explain the little miracles that happened within that life-changing experience, other than something that's more faith-based. The terrorists and the looters left about an hour before the first soldier arrived on the kibbutz, or 40 minutes, I believe is the exact number. We don't know why they left, the terrorists and the looters. Had they stayed longer, they would have killed more and raped more and looted more and kidnapped more. My daughter, her family, Sagui's wife and their daughters could very well have been murdered or kidnapped in those 40 minutes.
What do you think needs to happen in Gaza?
There will never be peace in our region, perhaps beyond, as long as Hamas, or a Hamas-like organization, it continues to rule. Through the world community, its generosity and its seriousness about creating a post-Hamas Gaza, these people have to be given, the millions who live there, they're not going anywhere. So the millions who live there have to be given something that they don't want to lose, something good that they don't want to lose. And maybe then we can all have a better future, because going back to what was serves no one.
Julie Stahl, CBN News, Kiryat Gat, Israel.
When we come back, articulating why he stands with Israel, nominee for ambassador to Israel, Mike Huckabee.
President Trump's pick for ambassador to Israel, former Arkansas governor and popular evangelical pastor Mike Huckabee, finally got his Senate confirmation hearing this week. Our correspondent Paul Strand shares the highlights.
Huckabee testified the brutal October 7th massacre clearly showed why Hamas has to go.
Hamas will have no future in Gaza. It can't. This was not simply a cold-blooded murder in which people came across the borders and shot innocent people. They massacred them. And they did it in the way that was most physically painful and in the way that was most personally humiliating. And worse, they videotaped themselves doing it because they were proud of it. And they published it with pride. And they announced repeatedly that they would do it again. Hamas is not a government, it's not a standing army, it is a terrorist organization, and they acted like it. And they must be treated as such.
Huckabee pointed out how America and Israel are tied to each other spiritually.
The spiritual connections between your church, mine, many churches in America, Jewish congregations to the state of Israel, is because we ultimately are people of the book. We believe the Bible. And therefore, that connection is not geopolitical. It is also spiritual. And to ignore that, to deny that, would be to make it very difficult for us to ever understand how to go forward in a relationship with them.
The former governor suggested it's ridiculous to insist Israeli land is the only place there can be a Palestinian state.
Israel is a tiny little strip of land. You know that. We all do. It's a size of New Jersey. But Muslim countries control 644 times the amount of land that Israel has. They've been surrounded by those who have sought to destroy it, annihilate it. Those who chant from the river to the sea are not bringing about peace. The Palestinians were given the opportunity in the year 2000 when Ehud Barak from Israel put everything on the table, virtually said, 100%, here it is, you get it all. And the Palestinian Liberation Organization walked away from it.
He stated there can really be no permanent peace till Palestinians stop teaching their children to kill Jews.
The other thing that has to happen is a cultural shift. There can be no peace and two-state solution if there continues to be education from the time a child is 5 and 6 years old living under the Palestinian Authority that says it's okay, in fact, it's desirable to murder Jews and to reward them for it.
Huckabee insisted America must face the fact the regime ruling Iran is as much a danger to the U.S. as it is to Israel.
Israel is the appetizer and we're the entree. They've said that their ultimate goal is to first take care of the little Satan, they identify as Israel, and then come after the great Satan. Senator, that's us. And whatever is happening to Israel, it is the canary in the coal mine. These governments, Iran being the most notable, who want to develop a nuclear weapon and who have the audacity to wish to use it to destroy a sovereign Jewish state so that they ultimately could destroy Western civilization.
Paul Strand, CBN News, Jerusalem.
Well, that's all for this edition of Jerusalem Dateline. Thanks for joining us. And please keep praying for Israel during this time of assault, for the protection of IDF soldiers and all those caught in harm's way, and for the safe return of all the hostages. I'm Chris Mitchell. For all of us here in the Jerusalem Bureau, we'll see you next time on Jerusalem Dateline.